15. Me, Myself, and My Epigenetic Environment. In 1988, John Cairns, a British molecular biologist, produced compelling evidence that our responses to our environment determine the expression of our genes. Cairns, through examining gene mutations, saw that not only does gene expression change in response to internal and external signals, but the gene itself also changes. A new field in science was subsequently born, a science of epigenetics, using the term coined by Cairns' predecessor Conrad Waddington, who used the term as a way to describe how an organism adapts over or above how he commonly understood genetics, hence epi, which means upon or above in Greek. Epigenetics examines how environments regulate gene activity and expression as a response to both internal and external signals. Through these observations, the scientific community has developed a greater understanding of how what we think about, say, and do changes the environments of our cells. For instance, when we think, we learn because we are changing our genes and creating new ones in response to our need to store the new information. To understand how this works, think of the way our bodies produce antibodies in response to viruses like measles or chickenpox. New genes are created by recombination, the process by which genetic material is broken up and joined to other genetic material, in response to the need to express the proteins to make these antibodies and protect our bodies. The same happens with our thoughts. Thoughts are real things. Essentially, people, plants, animals, and other living organisms start with a certain genetic code, the nature part of the well-known nature-nurture concept, at conception. Yet the choice of which genes are expressed or activated is strongly affected by environmental influences in terms of epigenetics. These environmental influences are the nurture part of the equation, the social, emotional, cultural, and economic environments we grow up in. God has set up a complex and beautiful interplay between us, our biology, and our environments. Due to this change, the expression of genes can change rapidly over time. Genes are influenced by internal and external factors, and those changes can be passed along to our offspring. Yet there is one other factor, the most powerful factor in God's intricate design, which dominates both nature and nurture: our uniqueness, or I factor. The I factor. We have a love-filled, powerful, and sound mind. 2 Timothy chapter 1, verse 7. We are fearfully and wonderfully made. Psalms chapter 139, verse 14. We have a phenomenal I factor, and we can change our mental and biological environments with the thoughts we choose to think. The emerging science of epigenetics is beginning to shine a light on how mental and physical health are within our reach, which contradicts the dominant, mechanistic belief that humans are biological machines. Epigenetics highlights our ability to respond to our environment, which includes everything from what we think to what we generally understand by environmental exposure. Thoughts and emotions, alongside exposure to sunlight, exercise, food, and everything we choose to put onto and into our body, directly affect DNA expression. Epigenetics is therefore the process of how the operation of genes changes in response to internal and external signals. Epigenetic changes occur apart from the genes, switching them on and off through the processes called methylation and acetylation, respectively. Acetyl and methyl groups are clusters of atoms that attach onto the gene and associated proteins, making them more or less receptive to receive and respond to biochemical and mind signals. An acetyl group switches the gene on, and a methyl group switches the gene off. A growing body of research is highlighting how these methylation and acetylation patterns change in response to thinking and lifestyle choices. Thinking toxic thoughts can change gene expression, just as certain diets or exposure to chemicals and pollutants can also result in changes that affect our genes. We see this power over our circumstances mirrored in Scripture. In Philippians chapter 4, verse 7, the Apostle Paul notes how the peace of God can protect our hearts and minds, a powerful truth reflected in Isaiah chapter 26, verse 3. You, God, will keep him in perfect peace, whose mind is stayed on you because he trusts in you. Proverbs 4 praises the beauty of God's living words, which are life to those who find them, and health to all their flesh. Verse 22. When we implant God's words into our minds through our thinking, we fill our brains with the powerful environmental influence of God's love, which directly impacts our mental and physical health in a positive direction. Talk about a sound mind. Fat is in the fire. The danger of toxic food environments. Epigenetics is essentially the pathway by which our body takes a signal from the external world, food, events, and circumstances, and internal environments, thoughts, and turns them into a set of chemical, electromagnetic, and quantum instructions for our genes. Thus, through our thought and lifestyle choices, we can create either a very healthy or a very toxic environment around our cells. Whatever we eat directly influences the environment around our cells. This biological process is what sustains life. Good, real food means a healthy environment in our brain and body, and this allows genetic expression to happen as it should. The proteins, fats, sugars, vitamins, minerals, phytonutrients, and all the other necessary components of food will affect our body in a wired-for-love way, just how God intended. And add a positive, love-based thought life to our menu, and we are set on the pathway to true sustainable health. Yet what happens if the environment is toxic? Say we go to the store and buy conventional burger patties, which came from cattle raised on a large-scale feedlot similar to the ones I discussed in Part 1. First, the fats, such as omega-3 and omega-6 fatty acids in the meat, have a different structure from the fats in chemical-free grass-fed cattle because the animals have been fed grains, many of which were genetically modified. In many cases, these cows are even fed animals and stale cake and candy with wrappers on, not to mention the fact that they eat these foods standing in their own feces. These new types of fats upset our biochemistry in much the same way as dropping crunchy crumbs into the keyboard of a computer upsets the functioning of the buttons. Just as that computer will experience difficulties, our biological processes will not function as they ought to, which can increase our risk of developing heart disease, diabetes, obesity, infertility, and Alzheimer's disease, to name just a few diseases. Of course, both omega-3 and omega-6 fatty acids are essential for our health, and without them we would die. Omega-6 is necessary to make the epigenetic signals that promote inflammation, while omega-3 develops epigenetic signals that calm inflammation. These two fatty acids work together in cell membranes and share regulatory enzymes. So when omega-3 needs more enzymes, omega-6 will need fewer enzymes. The wired-for-love design, in terms of omega-3 and omega-6 content, is such that we get the correct balance between these two fatty acids in our meat. When we eat foods with this balance of essential fatty acids, we will feel better, have more energy, and be able to think more clearly and quickly. In fact, our blood flow will be smoother and thinner, which prevents inflammation and protects against brain disorders and heart disease. When we eat conventionally raised beef, however, our omega-6 to omega-3 ratio goes up in favor of omega-6. Traditionally raised cattle fed a 100% grass diet have a ratio of omega-6s to omega-3s that averages to about 1.53 to 1. The ratio of these fats in cattle fed grains like soy and corn, however, skews heavily in the direction of omega-6s to 7.65 to 1. A recent study, for example, showed that eating moderate amounts of grass-fed meat for only 4 weeks can give individuals healthier levels of essential fatty acids. The volunteers who ate grass-fed meat increased their blood levels of omega-3 fatty acids and decreased their levels of the pro-inflammatory omega-6 fatty acids, potentially lowering their risk of cancer, blood clots, cardiovascular disease, cognitive decline, and inflammatory diseases, to name just a few of the health benefits of omega-3s. The individuals in the study who had consumed conventional grain-fed meat, however, ended up with lower levels of omega-3s and higher levels of omega-6s than they had at the beginning of the study, suggesting that eating conventional meat can be especially detrimental to one's health over time as omega-6 levels increase. Processed and refined gluten products are not the only foods that cause inflammation, contrary to popular opinion surrounding gluten and grain-free diets. Conventionally raised animals are also a problem. As omega-6 levels increase, the risk of inflammation increases. Essentially, we have to remember it is not the foods per se that are to blame, but rather what humanity has done to these foods. Biting off more than we can chew? And it's not just the fat in the fire, as the saying goes. Animals forced to live miserable lives in reprehensible conditions, having hoses forced down their throats when they choke from the diet their rumens cannot handle, have higher levels of stress hormones, as I am sure you can imagine. These hormones toughen the meat since they remove glycogen from the muscles just before death, which leads to decreased levels of the lactic acid needed to make meat tender. These hormones also lower the concentrations of vital B-complex vitamins, zinc, copper, chromium, antioxidants such as glutathione, potassium, iron, and linoleic acid, and vitamins A, E, and C, to name just a few that make up an essential part of our dietary health. Grass-fed, organically raised, and humanely treated cattle, on the other hand, provide a perfect balance of what we need to both survive and thrive in a wired-for-love way. Ultimately, we should be concerned about the way these animals are being treated, not only for their sakes, but for our own health. As Michael Pollan says, "You are what you eat eats." If we make toxic food choices, they will affect the epigenetically balanced environment in our brain and body, not to mention the effect raising cattle in large confinement facilities has on the intricate balance of our ecosystems. Our health, and the health of our beautiful planet, will suffer as a result. Yet food choices rooted in love will sustain life, since God created the world, and God is love. 1 John chapter 4, verse 8. An epigenetic investment in the future. In the early 20th century, Dr. Francis M. Pottinger, Jr. researched the dietary patterns of cats to gain a greater awareness of how food consumption and health are related. His findings were extraordinary. Dietary choices not only affected the cats eating the food, but the health of the next 4 generations of cats. His findings suggested that diets can alter the way genes function, since the behaviors of the previous generation were passed on through a form of genetic memory inheritance. Pottinger's research has since been corroborated by a number of animal and human studies. One of the seminal studies done on epigenetics and diet was carried out on agouti mice by the American scientist Dr. Randy Jirtle. The agouti gene is closely related to a human gene that is expressed in obesity and type 2 diabetes. Agouti mice, which have yellow coats, tend to eat ravenously if given the opportunity, and have increased incidence of food-related illness and death as a result. This same pattern of overeating is repeated in their children. Jirtle, however, changed this epigenetically. He bred agouti mice offspring that were normal, slim, and healthy simply by changing parts of the environmental signal, the diet of the pregnant mothers. Jirtle fed the agouti mothers to be a diet rich in a chemical known as methyl groups. These methyl groups are molecule clusters that are able to inhibit the expression of certain genes. This shift in food consumption changed the expression of food consumption genes in the younger agouti mice without making changes to the maternal DNA sequence. Thus, a simple change in diet, the 20% part of the mind-body connection discussed in Chapter 10, in the pregnant mother changed the genetic environment and had a dramatic impact on the gene expression of her baby mice. Epigenetic changes are incredibly important. According to a growing body of research, the same diet-related epigenetic changes occur in humans. According to one recent study, a mother's diet during pregnancy can alter the DNA of her child and increase her progeny's risk of obesity. Further studies have confirmed that a mother's diet before conception can permanently affect how her child's genes function. These findings suggest pregnant women should follow careful dietary advice, as diet may have a long-term influence on the baby's health after it is born. The maternal diet can affect the environment of both the mother and her child. Indeed, women of reproductive age need to have greater access to nutritional, educational, and lifestyle support to improve the health of the next several generations, since awareness can reduce the risk of diet-related conditions such as diabetes and heart disease. Yet maternal diet is not the only important factor in terms of epigenetic inheritance and diet. Researchers have found mice with obese fathers, even those mice with no symptoms of obesity or diet-related illness, frequently passed these characteristics onto their daughters. Sons cannot dodge this epigenetic bullet either. Both sons and daughters of obese fathers can inherit an increased risk of developing diet-related metabolic diseases. Scientists have also found that the offspring of obese mothers may be spared health problems linked to obesity, but their own children then inherit them. So obesity and its health consequences may skip a generation. Understanding how epigenetics functions through the generations is particularly critical in terms of malnourishment. When a pregnant mother is undernourished, her child is at a greater risk of developing obesity, type 2 diabetes, and other diet-related chronic diseases, in part due to epigenetic effects. A new study in mice demonstrates that this memory of nutrition during pregnancy can be passed through the sperm of male offspring to the next generation, increasing risk of diet-related disease for the grandchildren as well, although it is uncertain at this point in time how long such effects will continue to have a heritable impact. Your children are what you think. Our food choices are not the only epigenetic legacies we leave to our children. Another study found that the experiences of a parent, even before conceiving, markedly influenced both the structure and function of the nervous system of subsequent generations. In particular, this study found that a traumatic event the parent experienced affected the child's DNA, thereby altering the brain and behavior of the next generation. Similarly, when researchers examined the brains of rats that had been nurtured in a loving way by their mothers, they found significant biological differences, especially in a region of the brain called the hippocampus, which plays a significant role in regulating our response to stress. The more nurturing the mother was, the more this gene was activated, and the more the mother's children were able to deal with stress in a healthy way. This is not surprising, since God is love and His entire creation is meant to function in a wired-for-love way. Love heals, since love is the source of all existence. Studying epigenetics, or how thinking and eating environments impact current and future generations, is essential. With the rise in neuropsychiatric disorders, obesity, diabetes, and metabolic problems, we need to develop a multi-generational approach that looks at the fact that genetic memory can be passed between generations. This science is, of course, still developing. Researchers are not entirely sure of how the signal works and changes the environment, but change does occur. If we care about the health of our descendants, we cannot ignore our epigenetic impact. God was not merely being vindictive or harsh when He said that the sins of the fathers would be visited on subsequent generations. Exodus chapter 34, verse 7, Deuteronomy chapter 30, verse 19. He wanted us to realize that we have to be careful about what we think, say, and do, since our choices affect not only us, but our progeny. Science is catching up to the Bible. Planting healthy trees in the future. If you eat a healthy diet, you are not only investing in your own health, but the health of your progeny. By planting an apple tree in your garden, or by planting a healthy thought tree in your mind, you are investing in not only your own physical and mental health, but that of your biological legacy. What better way to show love for your neighbor, including your neighbor of the future? Matthew chapter 22, verse 39. What better way to love selflessly and without limit than to give up a momentary pleasure not only out of care for your own well-being, but also the well-being of your children's children's children? The pathway through which epigenetic signals change our internal and external environments and affect the expression of genes has many twists and turns. We can literally nurture epigenetic change by directing these twists and turns using our I factor, or the unique way we think. We can get involved in the process of changing our mental and physical health in either a good or bad direction through our choices. Indeed, the price of real whole foods is a bargain if it buys not only our own mental and physical health, but that of the next 4 generations after us. By that same token, what is the true price of cheap, processed, and refined mad foods if they are crippling the health of our progeny?